Hi! I thought it would be a good idea to sort of explain the idea of this video before we start. First off, this is not a video essay, it's more of an illustrated podcast. I did next to no research, all of this is just my stream of consciousness, and because of that, I would recommend taking every factual piece of info with a grain of salt. Also, it was constructed to be listenable in chunks, so if the runtime is scary, consult the chapters for movies you might be interested in. And about that stream of consciousness. This video sprung from a rubber ducking exercise I do with my friend Dan whenever I'm having a hard time writing an essay. I go on a walk with my dog and just kind of monologue until I crystallize the thought. It's just so much easier to get into that flow state when you're walking, you know? I highly recommend this for people who write for a living or just casually like me. Secondly, this, whatever this is a direct reference to Sean McTiernan's incredible podcast series Hundreds of Pixelated Dead Bodies, which ran in October 2020. It was a daily podcast about found footage horror movies, and listening through it literally changed my brain chemistry. The same goes for his other podcasts, from the more wide-reaching horror pod Hundreds of Dead Bodies, exploration of scum cinema in Live at the Death Factory with author Astrid Rose, the dense as hell thriller series All Units, and even his more classic just kinda talking about stuff podcast Self-Pity with the comics artist Aleksis Shi. I've listened through all of these multiple times, and they still feel fresh to me. And that segues neatly into my reverse sponsorship. Sean is currently doing an immense series called SFUltra, where he's attempting to brainwash himself into liking science fiction by reading 100 or more science fiction books. SFUltra is free, and you should definitely go seek it out immediately, but after years of people pleading, Sean finally started a Patreon where you can pay $5 a month to get an additional podcast called Perfect Taste Forever. It's nominally about him recommending something, but that doesn't really capture the vibe of the show, because it's every bit as interesting, insightful, and incisive as his other shows are. Sean is not sponsoring me to say this. On the contrary, I'm paying him to say whatever is on his mind, and I would like you to do so too. For transparency though, I think it's important that I mention that I did ask him if it's okay to use his name for this episode, and he gave it a thumbs up, so thanks man. One more thing before we get to the actual video. Shout out to Clive for making the thumbnail for this video. They're an incredible artist, a person of profoundly good taste, and just generally engaging to follow, so seek them out in whatever platform you're using. I'll put links in the description. Let's get into it. So I haven't done one of these in a while. I just saw a film called Leaving DC, and I really liked it, but I can't quite explain why. And I think doing this has usually been pretty helpful in trying to figure this stuff out, so I'll give it a shot. So Leaving DC is about this guy who, per the name, moves out of DC into this very remote house, and he starts to send these pre-vloggy sort of video updates to his OCD support group.
See? I'm gonna be just fine.
And at first they're all fun and games, but because he's not used to the sounds of the rural areas, he gets kind of scared on the first night out, and starts to record stuff around his house. First it's just weird animal sounds, but suddenly there are noises you can't really explain by animal sounds.
It's like they're saying why or who are you?
And from there on out, the movie is kind of this slow descent into madness. And it really got to me. And I think this really affirms to me found footage is the scariest subgenre of horror to me personally. I've been watching horror movies since I was like 10, and most often they're not really that scary to me anymore, and haven't been for a long while. Like I love watching horror movies. I think like 1/4 of all movies I watched are horror movies, and I find a lot of different things to like about them, but they're like pretty rarely that scary to me. But over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, the only movies that have gotten me like almost to the point of I need to stop watching this and kind of like do some meditation or something, I'm so fucked up, like that levels of scary, have been found footage horror movies. The first one was Marui the Curse. After that it was Actually Happened, Most Terrifying Psychic Phenomenon, Psychic Team Report Relived. I think that's the whole title. It's a long one and I never remember it to completion. But that movie too got me to this like state of pure like flight or flight fright. And now it's leaving DC. And I've been on a bit of a found footage kick recently. And it's been all fun and games. Like I really do like a lot of found footage. But leaving DC wasn't like a fun, interesting aesthetic experience. It was this like actual embodied feeling of I need to shut this off right now. And that kind of made me think, why is that? Why are found footage movies so scary to me? And I think it kind of comes down to like the structure. When you think about like mainstream found footage movies, they're pretty much tied to the Hollywood 3-act structure, certain pacing. This is how frights come up, how they come down. This is the sequence of people getting killed. You have your final girls and you know all that. And to me, that's kind of missing the whole point of found footage horror. If I really like think about Actually Happened and Leaving DC, the commonality is the sort of naturalistic, boring kind of vibe they have. Like both of them riff on things for a long time. Actually Happened has these long shots of like basically nothing happening because it's so committed to this restriction of only having 2 cameras, and you're constantly aware where they are. And because you're so committed to that restriction, the sense of pacing breaks down in this way that also works to break down the fourth wall. So I think in that sort of bad structure you find something that's more truthful and beautiful and emergent to the genre. And in Leaving DC's case, you only ever have like this one camera that's either recording him or whatever he's seeing, and that makes the main character feel vulnerable. But also when you contrast it with Actually Happened, you have a sort of briskness to the story. Like every new video update has an update to it. This happened, I'm watching this new clip, this is how I feel about it. So you get this like constant sense of momentum, and whenever you commit to one thing for a long time, you're like sucked into it in this very effective way. The scares in and of themselves aren't like all that incredible, but because they are laid out in this way, they have this dreadful magic about them. And if you want to like watch the movie yourself, I would like stop at this point because I'm gonna spoil what the scares are. And they are mostly, for over half the movie, his nightly recordings of someone chopping wood nearby and someone playing the flute nearby. And like when you say it out like that, it kind of sounds lame, right? Like especially playing flute. Like how is that scary? Let me tell you, I was fucking pissing my pants, dude. And I think that comes down to the sort of inhumanity of it. Because it happens every night. Every night he wakes up and there are these people who move oddly fast, playing the same melody on the flute. I'm getting goosebumps by just describing these scenes. And chopping wood nearby. And at first it just sounds like a person playing a prank on him. But the more it happens, it becomes clear that like nobody has this dedication. Especially without like a personal vitriol towards him. And it gets into this uncanny action zone, like this is happening but nobody would do it, so what is actually happening? And I think that's just like so scary, like people doing like these completely irrational repetitious things that are just like so like passively hostile. Like it leaves a lot of room for interpretation, like why are you doing this? Just gives me chills. The thing that doesn't quite work though is the ending. Like Leaving DC pretty infamously has a really bad ending. Once again, like if you want to have that like fresh experience, this is another point to stop, because I will be spoiling the end of Leaving DC. But at the end, he's drunk, like the main character is drunk, and he's desperate, and he has a gun, and he's had enough, so he walks out into the night, shoots once, there's like a second of silence, and then someone picks up the camera, and the movie ends. I think I know why. Leaving DC kind of has a theme going, which is like the inaction or the actions of people become heightened when they're not around you. Like when you tone down the hustle and bustle of a city, suddenly everything becomes clearer. Everything becomes scarier, like nothing is hiding, it's in plain sight. And the same happens with relationships. The main character has like this quasi love affair with one of the people in his support group, and she comes to visit him, gets too scared and leaves the next day. And later on it's revealed that she actually ended up dating another person in the support group. And on the flip side, you have the sheriff that the main character calls as tension starts to rack up and his trail camera gets stolen. The cop like actively refuses to help him, even though the situation does warrant at least some level of looking into, which, you know, realistic, a cab. And together they form this sort of binary where one person is doing something that he perceives as harmful and someone doesn't do something that he would find helpful. And then at the end of the story, this dynamic gets flipped on the main character. He goes on this ghost form to sort of trying to sort the situation out. And amidst all the hate mail and jokes he receives, there is one person who's actively trying to help him by saying that the way to get rid of the ghost is to show kindness towards them. So you see how this sort of relationship dialectics starts to form. And the main character just absolutely fucks it up. At the final scene I described, he's drunk, he's anxious, he feels like there's no one out there for him, and I think it's pretty heavily implied that he ends up taking his life. And I think in its badness, there is a little bit of poignancy to the closing scene, because as the camera rises after the one shot he takes, we do get confirmation that it was the ghost, and we as an audience are probably supposed to make this connection between the relationships that have played out throughout the movie. At least that's how I like to read it. I'm struggling a little bit because, like, after going through all this, there is that sort of, like, I think the execution is lacking, but the idea was there. And even my critique of, well, the pacing feels off could be just a bold experiment that fell flat on its face. But I don't know. I feel it's a worthwhile movie, and even like kind of thoughtful, but I can see why people don't like it. It's definitely a acquired taste, let's say, but I have acquired that taste, and to me the taste is a little bittersweet. Yeah, I guess that's a fully formed idea. Alright, bye. I will probably send both of these to you, because I am quite happy with the first vid I took, and I do have some thoughts again that I need to kind of sketch out. So yeah, I watched a movie called Fourth Kind, which is another found footage horror movie, although I would say that the found footage aspect of the movie is a little bit more contentious, maybe. Fourth Kind is a fake TV show, basically. Like, the idea is that when there were these shows in the mid 2000s that were kind of like reconstructions of happenings. Like, there's the one show with the actor of Riker from Star Wars. What the fuck was that name? Believe It or Not, I think, was the show, which is like you're presented with this supernatural happening and they're reconstructing it. And that's really what Fourth Kind is about. So you have these like very traditional Hollywood-esque scenes that are reconstructing these like VHS recordings of like witness testimony from alien abduction victims, and within the fiction the tapes are presented as real, but they are like not real in the sense that they are something that exists in our world. And that is, I think, a super interesting thing as far as like art goes. I think like the question about are found footage movies real, it has never been interesting to me. I think because, you know, I don't believe in aliens, I don't believe in monsters, I don't believe in ghosts, and I think this need for something to be real is kind of like a blight, a modern blight, because it's also affecting like straight up fictional movies. And I think there's like a Netflix movie right now, like, what the fuck, it's like they cloned Tyler or Tyrone or something like that, and people are asking, is this a real thing? It is not, but like I'm completely satisfied with the sort of superficial, this is a fictional product, I don't need to go further than that. Like my relationship with the movie is that by assumption it is not real, and it is quite a surprise if it is, especially when we are discussing topics like UFOs, you know, which Fourth Kind is. And I think because it is sort of a niche form, it is aping, and it is not aping the sort of trappings of TV productions. Like, it is a pretty lavishly done movie in most ways. Like, there are like beautiful colors on it, and there are really interesting shots. Like, there's this one shot that starts behind like an aquarium, and it's a little bit like high up, and you get this really interesting framing of the room they're in. And the colors, they're like the mid-2000s, like up to saturation, high contrast, like post-Matrix type of thing. And that is set against these really grainy sort of amateur VHS like documentary parts that then get like manipulated in very interesting like glitchy ways. Like, there's a scene where one of the abductees starts to channel the aliens, and the VHS rips apart in a way where it feels like the picture gets shifted a little bit, and all the shadows become noise, like VHS noise, and you get this like 2 layers of surface. Like, you get the picture and then the noise that's kind of like lying beneath it, you know. That's the primordial state of magnetic tape, and I think that's really interesting. It's like ripping apart the reality of the recording, showing that there's something inhuman behind it, which, you know, works also like poetically with the movie itself, because it is about layers of reality and, you know, all that stuff. And I think it was like legitimately like really scary and effective, and I got a lot out of it, even though once again the ending might leave a little bit to hope. And that's like a thing about like found footage things I'm finding out, is that the endings are often pretty bad. This one is a bit better only for the fact that it is aping the style of those aughts TV documentary like supernatural things, because they also always end with like, this person went to do this and that person went to do that sort of thing. But yeah, I gave it a 4-star rating on Letterboxd, and I really liked it. It is superb in my book. It is the second best UFO movie I've ever seen, and I think it's a really interesting take on found footage, even though it is like very, very loosely a found footage thing. But the thing is that a lot of people despise the movie, and from what I could read in the Letterboxd reviews, is that a lot of people despise the fact that it is like playing with these like layers of reality or unreality, you know. Like, a lot of people, when they write about the movie, is that they're somehow offended by it not being real. And that's a weird fucking way to discuss movies, in my opinion. Like, this is a movie that is talking about something like that is highly contentious, like UFOs. And to me, that already warrants like not engaging it as a real thing. But a lot of people don't seem to agree with me. And I don't know, it is so weird. It is so weird. And I think it's also like a whole thing with found footage, especially because it is trying to break down that barrier between what is fiction and what is reality by imitating amateur styles. But I don't care about that. Like, I really don't. Like, I think fiction is potent in and of itself, and the style is just one aspect of the storytelling. I don't need something to be real. More than anything, I don't even want something to be real, because like if you look at stuff like true crime, if you look at the way Netflix made the Dahmer documentary, if you look at the way we consume real tragedies as entertainment, I think that's a lot more fucked up than making a movie about aliens and being like, hey, we're doing 2 layers of unreality here, hehe. You know, like it would have been so much worse if it was real, because now we are playing with, is this like a factual retelling of the events? But at this point, like, we don't have to engage with that, like, at all. And I don't care about that at all. Like, it could have been, like, really insensitive, which most of the time is the thing. I don't know. I don't know what people want anymore. Fiction doesn't seem to be enough anymore. A huge summer storm is on its way. It's been on the news since like Thursday. Currently it's Monday, it's supposed to hit tomorrow. And currently I'm worried that I can either get to work or out of work via commuting, which I'm reliant upon. So, you know, pray for me, I guess. And I'm sorry for the wind noise. It's gonna be really bad in this one, but I think you'll manage. I also want to kind of apologize from last video, which I still haven't sent, but you'll get 2 for 1, so it's gonna be fine. I know you're not like a real horror guy, so maybe doing like a lot of spoiler alert kind of stuff is not really necessary, so I'm just gonna kinda explain the thoughts without much of a filter from now on. It's just gonna be more interesting for my purposes. So yeah, tonight I saw Invisible 2 Chasing the Ghost Sound, which is a South Korean found footage horror movie. Still on that kick. And I really liked it. It's a movie I think really pairs up well with the thoughts I had about Actually Happened and Leaving DC yesterday. Because it's another movie that's really focused on the way technology affects like the found footage experience. And it's a story about a woman who's being haunted by presumably her sister, and she wants to get this like famous ghost recorder slash exorcist, kinda like, it's implied but it's not really like explained, but you know, a ghost recorder as a person who can bring closure. But that said recorder has a contract with a TV station that says that if you want to have him come, you'll also consent to having your thing recorded for the TV station, which I feel is an interesting sort of subversion of the way a lot of these movies work. Because oftentimes when you have like a TV crew on board, like if you think about something like Rec, which is an incredible found footage movie that has an incredibly shitty American remake about it. But like if you think about Rec, it has the more common, a crew goes somewhere on like a routine thing, it goes bad, and the movie is kind of like documenting their survival. But because of this framing device of having to have extra people come in, kind of paints the TV company as a leech, as this sort of like exploitative force that's blackmailing you to give something to them for helping you. And that also comes through in the story, because as the investigation starts, there is a sort of moment when the ghost recorder has a chat with the producer of the show, who's clearly faking the sounds. And I think that's an interesting tension to have at the center of the movie. I wish it would have been explored a little more, but I'm glad it's there. The inverse is true for pretty much everything else. Chasing the ghost sound has a problem with over-explaining itself, because you have a very simple plot, which I am going to explain now, which is that the woman in need killed both her sister and her husband, like the main character's husband, who was having an affair with the sister, and the sister has come back to haunt her. Like it is a super simple plot, to the point that you can intuit it the moment they kind of bring it up. Like the second there's a moment where the ghost recorder goes and picks up a photograph, and he's like, hey, this is not you. And she's like, yeah, that's my identical sister. And he's kind of pushing in on it. You're like, oh, okay, I get the whole plot now. But it doesn't seem like the team thinks you got it. So it remains like this major plot twist in the end. And I think that kind of diminishes the impact of Chasing Ghost Sound. I think that's the fundamental flaw at the heart of it. Still, I think if you're going into Chasing Ghost Sound, you shouldn't go for the plot. But what is there is the titular recording of the ghost sound. And I think this goes back to what I said about leaving DC and this sort of dedication to your restrictions. Like the emergent coolness of found footage being found in this intersection of technological storytelling. In the case of Chasing the Ghost Sound, this appears as this differentiation between emulating the sound of human hearing, so basically like a normal recording.
이 사진 누굽니까?
제 남편이에요.
옆에 있는 여자분은요?
몰라서 모르세요.
And just raw dogging the way a microphone picks up sound.
잠깐 쉬었다 합시다.
And I know you're really familiar with this. When you listen to the world through a microphone, you ever notice that sort of background drone? Like that low mids hum? They really take that to like emphasize this like very strict microphone POV, and the product is this really oppressive soundscape. It is a hum that signifies the transition from human hearing to mechanical hearing. And in that mechanical hearing world, there's this low drone always present.
다른 곳으로 가봐요.
Like it works as a score almost, you know? And when they're trying to find the sounds themselves, The stereo field works as this sort of navigational tool. Like there's a scene in the middle where they're trying to find this rattle that the producer is faking, and they turn the microphone a little bit, like right on top of the, like right in the ceiling of the room.
이거 어디서 나는 소리야? 픽스!
So there's like this conflict of interest going on in you, like, oh, I want to find out what that is, but whatever it is the source of the scariness in the scene. And I think there lies the power of chasing ghost sound, and kind of like the wing of found footage horror I really like. It is this differentiation between the human perception of the world and how cameras and microphones and whatever else changes that. I was gonna talk about this with Leaving DC too, because I think its dedication to one camera at a time also has this effect, like that denial of having that information, and more than anything it being like a limitation of the technology rather than like an artistic, like compositional, lighting wise, like a choice you do as a director, is superbly eerie. Like there are scenes in Leaving DC where he's listening out to the sounds in the night, and he has his window open. There's like an immediate pitch black darkness right outside of his window. And whenever he gets close, you realize that there's a bug net, and every time he gets close, I'm so scared that there's a face or a hand or something that will press against that bug net, and I will never know before it does, because the technology present, like the perspective we're relying, isn't capable of producing that information. Like it can't capture it. And yeah, like found footage horror is the horror of seeing through the looking glass, seeing through a fundamentally alien set of eyes and hearing through alien set of ears that are yet built by us for our use. That's a nice poetic tension there, right? Yeah. Chasing the ghost sound. It's a good one. So maybe I should kind of get into how I got into this particular watching zone again. There's this movie called Psychic Vision Jaganrei, which is made by Chiaki J. Konaka. I think he scripted it. I don't think he directed it, but yeah, he's the dude behind Serial Experiments Lane, and dug the script, as far as I remember. Damn, I should check this before starting this. Well, anyways, so it was once again one of the movies Sean McTiernan talked about in his series Hundreds of Pixelated Dead Bodies, and when he made an episode about it, it was untranslated, and the episode, among being like about the movie itself, it was more about like people responding to movies not in their language in this sort of weird semi-orientalist way, I'd say. Like I think that was the point he was after. Like people have this weird, oh, this is so fucked up because I cannot understand it reaction to stuff that's not in their language. Since then, the movie has been subtitled, and I just wanted to kind of recheck, because I remember kind of liking the movie. It's not like a masterpiece or anything, but I really remember liking the movie, and it's been stuck in my head ever since I listened to that podcast episode. And yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, because even without the subtitles, you do sort of get the like context. Like you get most of the plot beats right. It's about like the idol industry, and the plot centers around this one song called Lovecraft, which, you know, quite fitting. Well, not really, like it's not a Lovecraftian movie, but, you know, it's a horror theme thing, but also because, you know, Lovecraft, it works with like as a pun, it works as a J-pop song. It's actually kind of city pop-ish. It's a cool melody on that song. It's been stuck in my head for a couple of days again. The thing about that song is that it was made by a person who is not the current artist or singer, and it was originally like a piano ballad. And the mystery is about who made that song. Ultimately, the movie is about like exploitation and two layers of it, sort of, because it is about like creating a new idol, but also about how that idol was built on top of a literal corpse. The person who originally composed Lovecraft killed herself after sexual abuse. That shit is like legitimately, that shift in context really sort of gives it that whole other level of terror, or like maybe not terror, but it's like it's so lurid and true for, you know, the idol industry. Like it is a deeply exploitative industry, both in Japan and in Korea. There's a great sort of video about the exploitation in the K-pop industry by Cock Philosophy, or CCK Philosophy currently, I think. Yeah, I haven't watched that in like 2 years, so could be that it doesn't hold up, but anyways. But yeah, Psychic Vision Jaganrei has this like really good climax that's like considering it's such a small budget, like 40-minute thing that's kind of for like genre festivals, I'd say. Like there's no way that she will be played in television or even being put into like a real Cineplex context. The ending is really like really good. There's like a music video shooting scene that turns into a massacre, basically. Like the main character dies, well, the idol dies in this really gruesome way, but the thing is that they kind of over-egg the pudding a little bit, because there is like a second ending from the point of view of the ghost, and it is like so fucking corny and unnecessary. Like I would, like if anyone would be watching Psychic Vision Jaganrei, I would really highly suggest just cutting it off after the climax closes. Like do not watch it the second time again, it will just ruin it for you. It is excessive, it is only bringing more context to a situation that's more horrifying as this more generalized exploitation plot. But I think it's an interesting sort of like curio if you're thinking about like Japanese ghost movies, because it is doing a lot of the same things as, you know, your Ju-ons and Grudges and like all of that, but imposing that into the found footage space, because you get to have that behind the scenes peek to this news segment about how they make pop idols. Like the main character, the reporter of the documentary, is extremely uncharismatic, and you see them kind of fail and how they're reprimanded for their failures, and you get to see like the awkward progression of the news story. Like there is a shift around the middle where they're like, well, fuck this story about the pop industry stuff, now we're after this mystery, but it feels like the whole fucking team has gone rogue and they're still doing the pop thing at the same time because they have to cover their asses, because there's no way you're gonna pass this through the channel. And I think that is like the most interesting part of it. Like that could have been developed a little bit more, maybe. Yeah, but it stands. Like I don't know if I would recommend it necessarily, like because there are so many good movies on this journey already. But it's available in YouTube, so if you're looking for like a 40-minute kind of sort of spooky little found footage thing with a good climax, you know, why not? It's okay. It's okay. Another movie languishing in the mid-tiers of found footage horror is Report on Latent Narcotic Substances on the Brain, Drugless. It has an interesting connection with Psychic Vision Jaganrei, actually. It was directed by Kazuya Konaka, who's the actual flesh and blood brother of Chiaki J. Konaka, who wrote, and yeah, I checked, Psychic Vision Jaganrei. I don't know what was going on in the Konaka household in the turn of the 90s, but they made a couple of kind of weird movies. Much like Jaganrei, Drugless is a faux documentary. This time we're trying to solve the mystery of young women in Tokyo dying of exhaustion and I think malnutrition. The main character is trying to track down this one person who went missing, which turns out to be kind of a weird thing about the movie. Like, they do focus quite a lot on the woman they're trying to find, but the connection between these characters is never established, so you're always kind of in this weird, like, do I know you feeling. It turns out that there's like a whole wellness group, new age cult thing behind everything. Spoiler, sorry. But they do tell that in like the first 10 minutes. And yeah, I think, like, formally speaking, Drugless is an interesting movie, structurally not so, and like story-wise, like once you get to the point that they tell that there's a cult, it's called Anfini, which I think is a fantastic name for a cult. But yeah, after you know that it's a cult thing, you can intuit the story from there pretty easily, and that kind of does a number on the structure of the movie. There's like the first 5 minutes is fantastic. I'm beginning to notice that there's a certain sort of TV B-roll footage thing I'm really into. Like, you have those stationary shots of like physical objects on tables. They're like dimly lit for mystery, and I just can't get enough of that. Like, that is one of the best stylistic things about like found footage horror movies especially, and you don't really see that much outside of found footage in fiction. It is kind of like aping the, you know, TV style. But yeah, I wish that was kind of a bigger thing. But yeah, there's this like one shot after which the movie starts to slow the fuck down for like 35 minutes. Like there's a shot that's inside a club bathroom. That's like a CCTV shot, but like super grungy. Like, it looks like fucking Gaspar Noé movie. It's great. But after that, you get a lot of waffling, and I think that's like a concession to the style and trying to remake the sort of TV documentary stylings they're going after. There's a lot of time allotted to explaining like how drugs work on your brain, how like runner's high works. There's even an extended scene where they go harass like a person who grows weed. Hello? weird fucking choice. Like that scene just drags on for like so long, and it feels so weirdly cruel. Weird fucking choice. Like I know they're kind of trying to build like the desperation of the main character. Like he's blaming everyone who uses drugs on the disappearance of this one woman, but like once again we don't know their relation, so it is like kind of weirdly like just left to float there without much weight or impact. But like after the 35 minutes of just kind of jamming, we get to the other good part, which is when they infiltrate the cult. And this is where I think we get to the stuff I like about Drugless, because I think the plot and the structure doesn't really work. But Drugless has the most interesting things going on with the camera so far, because unlike the sort of simplistic one-person filming, this time you have like candid cameras. And remember, this is like the early 90s, so you have like these absolutely garbage quality small cameras that are placed into like a sweatband and a bag, which create this rotten atmosphere to the scenes where they're infiltrating the cult. Because you have like smearing on the frame, you have light diffusing in weird ways, you have weird colors going on. Like the main character's camera is tinted in this like sickly yellow, and that kind of pulls you in to the atmosphere of those scenes, because you're supposed to feel like you're like falling into the charms of the cult. You're kind of being drawn in, and the main character, you get like a very literal point of view shot where he's kind of like nodding off, which is like him falling under, which I think is like a very interesting choice. It sells the seduction. And when you contrast that with the person, like the cult leader, yelling and being like, you're weak and you're supposed to be drawn in and all that, like it has that vibe of like military hazing, but in like a weird new agey context. So like the contrast between getting sucked into it, like texturally, which is like the seductive thing, but it also being like a violent act, which makes it feel almost like exhaustion more than this like beautiful, it is compelling to me, like they're getting exhausted, like they're running out of power, and the other cameraman is like shooting the main character candidly when they're like nodding off. It is glorious. Like I really like those scenes. They have a very potent feeling to them. Before we get into the final scene, I do have the note that there is a kind of unsuccessful experiment going through. Like there are these scenes that are super stylized, like out of character, like psychic visions of Jaganrei. No. Like psychic visions of the person seeing the woman he's looking for. And they are kind of interesting on their own, but the scenes mix about as well as water and oil, so you're left with this weird friction in the story that I feel doesn't quite land. But I'm finding hard to say that it doesn't work at all either. Like, it's really weird. I feel you could do that in another type of movie really successfully, but like contrasted with this more techno-oriented view, contrasted with everything else. Yeah, I think it's a bold experiment that doesn't really land. But yeah, then we get to the end, which is like this glorious fucking altered states tripping sequence where there's like early 90s computer graphics that are like jagged and harsh. They have the cosmic vibe, and then you get like affected shots of the main character and the woman she's looking for, and like it is like this chaotic outburst that just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. I think it works. It's a nice climax after all that build up. But yeah, overall, I think it could have used a lot more cloak and dagger type like approach to its story. It's an hour long. It could have been edited down like 15 minutes for it to be a little bit more concise. And especially like the weed growers interview just could be completely cut out. It is so like pacing wise, like it just drags the whole movie down. I don't know. Would I recommend it? Kind of like in the same way that I would recommend Psychic Vision Jaganrei. Like, it's interesting, but it's not really like amazing. But yeah, that's report on latent narcotic substances on the brain. Drugless. Peace. I think the season is kind of coming to a close, or I think I need to put it to a close soon-ish, because I've been watching these movies for 2 weeks now, and almost nothing else. And like, I've been enjoying my time, and I really like to do deep dives like this, but at this point some of the reoccurring problems are starting to be so noticeable that they're diminishing in returns. Like, it's harder and harder to not pay attention to certain things. Like, I watched the Marui video last night, which is, by all accounts, a pretty damn good found footage horror movie, and we'll get into that. But since I've been in the zone, keyed into the frequency, seen the grander structure behind it all, tasted all the finest wines, it's starting to dawn on me that a lot of these movies have a bit of a structural problem going. Like, I'm not even talking about like it's an inherent part or anything. Like, if you watch some of the absolute best found footage things like Norway the Curse or Savage Land, or, you know, something of that caliber, they don't really have this problem. But I'm finding that a lot of the more obscure ones and the ones done on a budget seem to really have, like, they need to hire editors, and like harsh editors at that, because like there's just so much like extra things in these movies, and like generally care that much. And I'm a person who's always defending excessiveness in movies, I feel, because like that's the place where you find the finer details, the tasty fat and gristle of cinema. But like, these movies are just chock full of some unnecessary shit sometimes. And I think Marui video is like the one that kind of broke my tolerance for it for the time being. I will be watching a couple of more, but or at least one. I feel I have a few scoped out that I might watch. One rewatch I really want to talk about, and this is the perfect video to do it, so expect at least one Marui video. It's a fresh Korean movie. It came out in 2023 this year, and for that reason I won't really get into it in the same level of like plot analysis or even like sort of stylistic things. I'll try to sort of sell it to you more than analyze it. So what's Marui video? So it's sort of a procedural, at the beginning, and the beginning is the best part, once again. But at the beginning, it's a procedural. There's this legendary piece of evidence in a murder case. It's a video of a person killing their partner with a knife in full view of a movie camera, and it's been told that there's a ghost that can be seen in a mirror on the background, or maybe not even a ghost, maybe it's a witness or an accomplice or some such. And the movie starts from this very intriguing premise of, hey, let's find and sort of do a documentary about this legendary piece of evidence. And I really want to zoom in on the first section when it's still purely a procedural thing. Because once again, the B-roll, it is immaculate. It is like, if you take what I like about B-roll and just pump it full of serotonin, that's Marui vid's like first 15 minutes. There's a piece of evidence, there's like a piece of paper with a few photographs on it, a miscellaneous text, and it's like, it looks like a collage piece of artwork. And I don't really hate to be that guy, but for the sake of a joke, I'll say I hate to be the guy who's like, oh, the choices in this shot, they draw these impeccable lines, man. Like, it's drawing these pleasing lines. It's very, like, if you reduce it to its like lines, dude, it looks so good. But it fucking totally does. Like that one piece of evidence is hitting my pleasure center like a Kazimir Malevich shaped missile, like a nuclear warhead, straight into my cortex. That one piece of prop. Yes! That shit is so good. And also, the thing I would use to sell myself on it is that in the beginning, this is like the first scene, they get access to like a place where they hold the evidence for murder cases, and the person taking them there is like, hey, just so you know, there's a lot of black mold in this room. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's kind of spooky, kind of slightly gothic on its face. And when they get to the room, it's like this plume that rises in the wall and spreads in the ceiling. And it's such an arresting picture. And they use it multiple times in the movie, and it gets recontextualized. And they say that it's like rising from the evidence. And it's this like, you get a sense that it's like the feeling of maliciousness escaping the object and tainting the world around it. And it's just, oh dude, fuck me. When I got there, if it would have stayed that good, I don't think any movie in the next 10 years could have topped it. And like, the movie in general is pretty good. It's one of the better ones in this season. But it also falls to some like structural problems. And I think the way it does found footage outside of the first like half an hour or something, it like veers so far away from being like the sort of like the technology focused found footage I'm craving, and it becomes like just a very beautifully produced Korean genre movie, which is not like, I don't want to complain about a movie looking incredible. And Marui vid, like, it does have that South Korean like, oh, this shit is like painterly I'm kind of curious because that seems to be like a major thing in South Korea in the past like 10-15 years. Like a lot of their movies just look incredible in this very specific sort of high definition, lush colors, good composition sort of way. I'd be very curious to delve into the hows and whys of that. There's probably like an art school or something. That's beside the point. The thing is that it is like 100 minutes long or something, and there's a lot of repeats on the information we already have. Like, it's justifiable to a certain degree. Like, they are recounting stuff we know from a slightly different perspective, so we're always learning a little bit. But I don't know, it's the pacing, and the more you think about it after you've seen it, the less impactful all of that like extra stuff feels. But yeah, Marui video, it's pretty good, not perfect. If it comes to a theater near you, go check it out. I'm currently in a dog park. I'm standing on top of a little mound of gravel, and there's a pile driving machine way in the distance. Anyways, today I saw Forbidden Quest, and it was another fucking incredible found footage movie. It's really different compared to everything else on this list, which is curious and always super awesome to see. It's a fake documentary that was released in the 90s, which is pretending to be released in the 40s, and it's depicting a fictional expedition that happened in 1905. So, you know, complicated already. And it's like pure gothic in a way I haven't seen a found footage horror movie be up to this point, at least. It is like Mary Shelley levels of gothic. It is actually the most reminiscent things for its style are like the ending of Frankenstein. Well, the framing story of Frankenstein, you know, the part where it's told to an Arctic explorer, like a captain that retrieves Victor Frankenstein, who's chasing his monster through the barren wasteland of Antarctica. Like, you know, that part. And it is about the voyage of a ship called Hollandia, which goes terribly wrong. The ship is basically being run by an Italian guy who's like evil incarnate. He has his own thing going on that nobody knows. The captain is subservient to him, even though he's just a passenger. And it is. I'm having trouble finding words to describe it, and it is basically two levels of filmmaking happening. It is. Oh, there are some friendly dogs coming. I'll resume this later. Oh, that was so nice. I had a good chat with a older gentleman I know from the dog park, like in that context. And yeah, I think kind of lost where I was going. So I'm just gonna talk about like the technical aspect of the movie a little bit. Because it's like deceptively simple. Or like, not even deceptively, it is simple, but that simplicity is very effective. It has like two distinct like tracks going, which is one, like this completely fictional acted interview, which is told in this grand, like once again, gothic sort of writing, a person recounting their experiences on that voyage. And there are like these
moments that I just...
We had enough food on board, but little fresh meat. In good weather, when it wasn't blowing a hurricane, we went out on the ice to hunt. But even the animals had deserted that wasteland. I guarded the dogs, but a body has to sleep, don't you? A body has to sleep. It was good the ship creaked so. The wood was under strain, you see. 3 more sailors were dying. We people have allowed pain.
Just... oh, man, like, there's a moment where he describes them going past Georgia, and the ship goes near, like, a fishing town where they're whaling, and he describes it as...
We weren't allowed ashore. I didn't grieve much for that, though. The harbor there is an open grave. Dead whales everywhere, rotten away. Giant stinking slaughterhouse.
And just like, man, come on, get the fuck out of here. That's so good. That is so good. And then there's the second track, which is like actual Dutch archival footage of some voyages that were taking place in, I think, the early 20th century. They said it's just like archival footage, and it does look really old, so I'm guessing it's around there, because there is some damage to it. It does remind me a little bit of Decasia, and because of the lower fidelity, you have a lot more leeway with stuff being on screen. So when they're like describing a southern light, you have this kind of like oddly colored picture of the sky. That is most likely not like an actual northern light, but you know, they can get away with that stuff because the film is so open to interpretation. And just like, how could it not? Like, the movie is like pieced together from these disparate archival footage elements, which I think don't even depict the same continents, let alone like a straightforward narrative. It is just pieced together in this like honestly impressive way, but like you couldn't just have them be the story. And I think in that way it puts to question the common truism of film, which is show don't tell. Like, this movie couldn't be show don't tell. It has to be tell and add. Forbidden Quest is like fundamentally a Lovecraftian movie. It even has a straightforward reference to Tekalili, which is one of the Lovecraftian old gods or something like that. I'm not like that up to the mythos, but like it has this straightforward reference, and because the footage isn't supernatural in nature, they can't show it the same way Lovecraft is always going on about how things are indescribable and beyond understanding. So, you know, you have to have this beautiful narrative be this guiding red string between disparate edited segments of archival footage, you know? And I think it's no lesser of a movie for telling, not showing. I think the telling is the best part, and it is just like such a good like stylistic thing to add that footage to it. I think Forbidden Quest is a top tier movie on all fronts. It is incredible. It's starting to rain. It's dribbling just a little bit. And I think that's the perfect situation to talk about my house walkthrough. legitimately one of the best horror short movies I've ever seen, and I think I will ever see. I saw it a couple years ago now, and it just left an indelible mark on me. And I think I've seen it 5-6 times since then. And every damn time, it is as powerful as it was the first time. And like, the thing about My House Walkthrough is that it's what it says on the tin. It is literally just a guy walking through his house a couple of times. It's like an ambient type of horror. There isn't really like a thing that happens. The dude is just walking in a circle around his house. It keeps being like so vile to see. Like, that shit is legitimately rotted through. To see it just exist in this like decrepit state is really alarming. Like, Astrid Rose, who was a part of Live at the Death Factory, which is another podcast Sean McTiernan was in, describes it as r/male living spaces. And like, yeah, like, it does have that same feeling of like seeing some of the most unkempt spaces people live in, but like turned to a nightmarish degree. Like, there's no way. Well, of course there is a way that a person lives in this squalor, but like, there shouldn't be a way. Like, in a just world, there would be like an intervention or like just something. Like the sheer existence of a place like that feels like a violation in some like deeper degree. And the movie is just like, as I said, this person is just walking around these hallways around his house, and it is dark, and there's a typhoon outside, and you can hear it as this dark pad on the background, kind of like with Chasing Ghost sound, you know, that same effect. Like, there's the hum of the world, but also it is like actively having an effect on the surroundings of the movie. Like, there's a lot of language, like there are these subtitles that are like the inner monologue of the person trying to sort of do the house tour, and they are looping in this particular way, where there are a couple of sentences that he just keeps coming back to. The tatami mats are terribly damaged. My grandfather sealed away this room. The roof keeps peeling when it rains. Like, there's that visceral connection. Like peeling is like a neutral and a correct word to use, but when you see this fleshy space and you hear the word peel, you immediately make an association with skin. And it's like this horrible house as a body going through a body horror transformation in slow motion, and a person is trapped within it and doesn't even seem to want to leave. Like, he has this reverence or like a sense of normalcy tied to the building, and he's just casually just walking around, like showing like, hey, here's my collection of dolls. It has a profound effect on me. And formally speaking, I think My House Walkthrough is one of the rare movies that understands darkness. Like there's no external light. The only light in it is coming from the camera, and the light is like catching on these like screen doors which get overlit, while at the same time everything else is just like buried in this absolute blackness. And like seeing that dance, like seeing that some things being overlit that obscure the dark frame is a thing that you don't see that often, even though it is the best way to depict like a total darkness. I think I've only ever seen it once, and it's in the sort of mid Netflix horror movie The Ritual. There's a scene where the main characters are in an abandoned cabin and they hear a noise outside, and they take their flashlight and like kind of like try to scan the area, but there are so many branches that just catch the light and make it impossible to see. And as a person who spent most of his youth in like rural areas, like that feels so true. Like that is the fear I've had. I've had to go to the outhouse at 2 a.m. and heard a crack and pointed a flashlight at a tree, and the tree is like nearly glowing while everything else is pitch black. That gets to me. That's the good stuff right there. Another thing the light does is it's like very shallow. So every time he does like the rounds, you're expecting something to come to view, and it just suddenly appears out of the darkness, like just a little faster than you thought. And because of that shallowness of light, you almost get these jump scares of things appearing. It's like a draw distance, and suddenly there's a fucked up thing again. And like when he goes to the bathroom, I won't spoil it, but when he goes to the bathroom, I feel my stomach drop every time. Like that first glimpse is just I was trying to watch his other short movies for this vid, and I checked User 666 and the one with the cutesy name about like trying to sell you stuff that's secretly fucked up. They didn't, like, they were quaint. I think they're kind of nostalgic, but they don't have the terrifying pull of My House Walkthrough. It's just the texture of everything being this like hollowed out, rotten through, just saturated, waterlogged. Yeah, there's just nothing like it. One of the final and penultimate episodes of Hundreds of Pixelated Dead Bodies is Sean's very personal exploration into the Blair Witch Project, which, you know, kind of unsurprising. It is the granddaddy of the genre, not the one that invented it, but the one that popularized it. It is kind of a flashpoint for modern horror in general, but especially for found footage. And among kind of analyzing what the movie meant for the genre and like the time it was made, he also explores what it means to him, how it could have been ruined by some of the creative choices that were averted by what seems to be like a hair's breadth away. And he also discusses how it is such an obvious choice to talk about when you're discussing found footage horror.
But I wasn't going to do it because I was like, there's nothing to say about Blair Witch. It's just the one I happen to watch. It's the big one. It's like, would I, if I was doing a, top 31 I don't know, like alternative albums from the 90s, like would I cover Nevermind when I could talk about, like, I don't know, a Kill All Redneck Pricks album or something? Obviously not. Like, who wants to hear someone talk about Nevermind? But this film, I still felt it very, very deeply, you know?
And I think if you watched the video so far, like if you watched it this far, I think we're already like an hour and 10 minutes in or something. You're probably noticing that there's a distinct lack of like hard-hitting movies, like the ones the genre is known for. I ain't talking about Cloverfield, Lake Mungo, Noroi, nor, you know, the Blair Witch Project. And that is kind of by design. I do like most of them, and I will do a whole segment in the conclusion where I will recommend you some of the like big ones, like the more obvious ones, and ones that Sean covered. I didn't really want to like go on his territory all that much because I think he has made such like a Herculean task of going through these movies and already having like said most of the stuff I would have said like concerning the movies I've seen from those. There are some I haven't seen yet. There are some I won't see. But like the question of doing something obvious is always something that's kind of in the back of my head. I'm always thinking about stuff that's obscure and kind of like the dissonance of analyzing something in the depth I do, because you know, you're basically spoiling something that I'm in the very low majority of having seen it to begin with. And I do think there's kind of a cool factor to seeing something like this, and that is sort of a selfish impulse on my part, but I get going when people go beyond analyzing the stuff that's out now or that has been talked quite extensively. I don't care about canon. Well, I do care about the canon, but also in a kind of a passive way. But I do strive to be what my channel purports to be, which is unfeatured films. Sean has also talked about like doing something, like he had a series in his ongoing podcast series, like a sub-series in it called Fuck You, which is about underrated gay novelists. And in the conclusion, he talks about going for the obscure ones.
Is there anything for me to say that they won't be saying on their show? And everyone is like, oh, I want to hear your review too. But sometimes I feel like, I don't know. It's less interesting to me if I can just look up a load of reviews and get mad at them. Like look up a load of reviews and kind of, you know, that like come and I'm on kind of on my own here with this, and I'm really interested by it, you know. So that's the constant. Two wolves are inside me. One always wants to do obscure shit. The other wants to repeat what Patrick Klepek said in a stupid voice. But as a means of criticism.
And that really struck me. And on that note, I won't be covering the Blair Witch Project. I have out-obscured you, Sean. So if you're watching, I have won 3 years into the future with the power of hindsight. This is the most fucking stupid and long intro. Anyways, I watched the Italian spin-off of the Blair Witch movie, Doc 33, and it's okay. It's like, it's got major issues. It's got some stuff going for it. Like, I will admit that at the beginning, there is the first scene at night, and it's shot on like 8mm film, and I love how 8mm looks in a horror setting. Just the visual texture is like million hours of ASMR per frame. I can't get enough of it. I love how 8mm looks, especially in these situations where whatever you're shooting isn't like composed and lit and produced. I like the rawness. It reminds me of all the music I like, because I like music that's like tape based, produced by a single person on the budget of a tuft of grass and the warm glow of a neon light or something. I don't know. This metaphor is escaping me. Anyways, I really like it. And I think it is used somewhat successfully throughout the movie. Like, there are things that look amazing just because it's shot in 8mm. And once again, I have feelings about the meta level of Doc 33, because I haven't really been talking about like actors and stuff, because I'm not like an actor-centric film watcher. I love Mads Mikkelsen and that's about it. And like, this got me thinking about like the amateurishness of found footage and how that can be a really powerful tool, because a lot of the people who are doing found footage tend to be amateurs, people who don't have the budget, the experience, the whatnot. And it's a genre that's trying to achieve that feeling. It's almost like free jazz. Like Patricia Taxon had this joke in one of her videos where she said that free jazz is very talented musicians trying to sound like they don't know how to play instruments. And that's why it's cool. And I agree. That is 100% one of the reasons why free jazz is so fucking cool. And it's also one of the reasons why found footage is so cool. It is people actually doing cool stuff without knowing what they're doing, like consciously. Of course, you have like the outliers. You have your Noruis, you know. Like, Noroi is a perfect movie on all fronts. They knew what they were doing. But the people who are doing Doc 33 don't, and that really plays for it. And I think the way they are kind of not great actors works really well to sell the verisimilitude of the movie. Like, because the people are not good actors playing people who are not good actors. Like, it is 1-to-1. And because you get to see a lot of behind the scenes material once again, you get the sense of that, like, amateurishness. Like, they are way beyond their skill level with this. There's this scene pretty early on where one of the main characters is trying to like introduce a Ouija board, and she flubs the line 3 times, and that's the most relatable thing I've ever seen in a movie. And especially with me doing this voiceover on a dog walk is just perfect across the board. I love that. It is breaking the fourth wall in a way that really speaks to why I like found footage. And there are like these scenes of them going to the place. Like, there's this abandoned orphanage that they're trying to do an exorcism on. And they go there, and there's a shot that starts, and you can hear like 1, 2, 3, action, And I know the crew walks in, like 3 people walk in, and they look so awkward. They're just like kind of looking around in this stiff manner. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, that throws me back to the film school days. It's great. I do like that aspect. And once again, like the 8mm really works for that too, because you're like constantly reminded of the artificiality of the situation. Sadly, outside of that, I didn't really find a lot I liked about the movie. There's a great scare and a nice follow-up to that scare. That's like the turning point of the movie. But even then, the pacing is just like half a beat off, and it ends up not being as good as it could have been. And generally, watching this after the great time I had yesterday with my house walkthrough and the Forbidden Quest is like so illuminating about what I like and dislike about the genre, because it is so finely tuned for these moments. And just like when you're telling a joke, it needs to feel effortless and thus invisible. Like the technique, like that needs to feel invisible and, you know, unremarkable. But when you flub it, the contrast is so great that you immediately get what's wrong. And I think Doc 33 is like procession of things, doing things wrong, that illuminate how other movies are doing it right. So I think it was an instructive experience. And I just kept like going back to like very fundamental questions about the movie itself. Like in fiction, it happens in
1998.
And I'm just like, why? Like, why is this movie taking place in 1998? Like, I get it, it's about the 8mm. They wanted to shoot in 8mm because it's like scary and hauntological and whatever. It looks good. But you could have just made them like hipsters. Like, because like the team is, like they are all hipsters. Like outside of the movie. They wanted to shoot on 8mm because it looks good. It is like scary and interesting by itself. So why couldn't the characters be hipsters? It could have given them a lot more intrigue, and it would have prevented a very awkward scene later on concerning the internet. And like just there are so many like small things that could have been much better if they just had thought through like the implications of what they were doing. And especially there's a scene when they get to the orphanage and there's a piece of glass that drops on one of the characters, and it destroyed a trope for me just completely right then and there. And it's been an annoying trope up until this point. Like, I'm not saying that this is the first time that my eyes opened and this kind of sucks, but just like that broke the camel's back to me, because the first thing he says is, why are you shooting? Why are you shooting this situation, this like very dramatic situation that could be associated with the haunting? A piece of glass fell on me, I got injured, why are you shooting? Like, of course you're shooting. Like that shit is the reason you are shooting. That is the juiciest bit of material you could have. And you're questioning why people are shooting that? Like, come on, man, why are you questioning this? Like, I don't get it. Just like that sort of stuff, like the thoughtlessness of what you're doing kept coming up to me one after the other. Like, there are scenes and scenes that just made me question, like, couldn't this be a thing in the fiction? Later on, when like the penultimate scare happens, the one I mentioned, the turning point of the movie happens, it is revealed by a very, very clunky line that, oh, stop scaring us, you know, we don't really believe in this and we're doing this for money. Why couldn't that be like a thing in the text, like that didn't come up beforehand. Like, I think it would have been really fucking interesting if these people were like from the beginning like non-believing assholes who go to this site of like historic brutality to shoot this soulless cash grab thing just for the laugh of it on 8mm because they're pretentious and like teenagers and stuff. Like, that is a lot of characterization left on the table because they just couldn't square the circle, I guess. But yeah, that's Doc 33. So last night, is every last one of these gonna start with last night? Anyways, last night I saw Horror in the High Desert, which is a bit of an indie darling from what I could gather. It's the biggest movie on the list, like right under Fourth Kind, but where Fourth Kind was kinda picked up by the TV, and you know, it's a mid-budget Hollywood movie. It has Mila Jovovich in the leading role, so it was always going to be the biggest on this list. Horror in the High Desert is like big on TikTok. TikTok has the most random, like, collective taste in horror, both books and movies. Anyways, Horror in the High Desert is about a hiker called Gary Hinge. And if you've noticed, I never remember the names of characters in these movies. But when the memetic device is Gay Hinge, it's a little bit easier to remember. Anyways, Gary is an extreme hiker. Like, he goes on these week-long hikes way out in the plains. And one day, he just doesn't return. And that's where the movie begins. It's essentially kind of like Fourth Kind, actually. Like a fake, mysterious things happening documentary made for TV. But where Fourth Kind was kind of like, you know, the fact or fiction recreation sort of weird happenings TV show, Horror in the High Desert is imitating the styles of like Missing 411 or something of that caliber. Like, you're actually interviewing the people involved and you're building the story from the materials they gave you and like independent research you're doing as a team. And I think that's interesting because I used to be really into those documentaries as a teenager. A lot of them were on Finnish TV when I was like in middle school. And I really thought a lot about like the value of imitation and like forensic recreation, because there is this interview with the director where he says that for him the most essential thing in making a found footage horror movie is like being as true as you can. But as a person who's seen probably hundreds of hours of the sort of TV documentaries he's referencing, I could notice some like anachronisms. Like, if you're thinking about the interview footage they use throughout the movie, it ranges from really convincing to what were you even thinking? Like, Gary's sister, perfect. Like, the emulation is on point. 3-point lighting, off center, it is just on the money. Same thing with a private investigator she hires later down the movie. And all the others are not so good. If we think about the interview with the roommate of Gary's, the shot is underlit in a way that doesn't draw out deep shadows or something contrasty or atmospheric. It just looks very cheap and amateurish in a way that breaks the illusion, at least for me. Like, this would never get past like an actual documentary crew. This is not up to code. so to say. And the same goes with the interview footage with this investigative journalist who's been looking into the subject. Like, I think with the aspect ratio and the sort of weird flat lighting, they're trying to emulate like a Zoom call recording or something. And it's right on that edge where it looks crummy enough to sort of communicate that feeling, but at the same time, like if it were to be a documentary like this, they would just do a screen recording, like bring out the fact that it is this recording. And like these are the major things, but there are also other little anachronisms that kept like grinding on me. Specifically, like in the last third, they discovered that Gary had a YouTube channel where he would post like videos about his journeys. And there's a shot of them like looking up the videos. The TV documentary thing of, you know, over the shoulder stuff, picture of the screen, maybe like a reverse shot of, you know, people's eyes, like the screen reflecting on their eyeglasses or, you know, something like that. They use some YouTube stock footage of like a laptop in this black void with bokeh lights. And I don't know, like, I know I'm being like really nitpicky here, and I'm not like necessarily saying it's bad, but like it was a thing that really caught my attention because I'm like, I know the reference and I'm just questioning how far you went with it and what is the reason you went with this particular style without attempting to recreate it to your, well, basically like your best ability. And why did you go this far without going the extra half a mile? You know? And I don't think I have like a concrete thought about it. It's just like a thing I kept noticing. And it's probably just like the way things are. Like, you know, progression of time makes other solutions and sort of visual linguistic quirks come up. Like, you know, the stock footage I railed on about is a very YouTube thing to do instead of the TV documentary they're trying to recreate. And I think it's just like saying like sup or YOLO in a movie that takes place in the 70s or something. It's just, I don't know. I'm sure like most people don't even care, but kept me thinking. I guess it's also really important to think about like the context of these movies existing in this sort of emulation space, because like they exist to fulfill a function that those shows could never do, which is to actually show the happening, the monster, the ghost, the murderer in this case. Like you can go there. Whereas when you're making like a TV documentary or an actual documentary in quotation marks, you really can't. Like you have to consider the material you're getting. You have to consider the interviews, B-roll footage you can gather. You have to think about the implications of the documentary to the life of your subjects. You know, there's a lot of stuff you need to think through to make one of those. Or at least there's an illusion that you need to think that through. But to have the ability to show what you're always kind of denied in those shows is powerful, and I think it is a worthwhile artistic goal to strive for. And if we like think about the actual scares of horror in the high desert, it really does pay off. Like the last 10 minutes are really good. It is a movie with a really long build-up, and I found the mystery to be pretty compelling. It's a little slow going, but you know, like that shit. And when we get to the last recording made by Gary, which is like from the first perspective, infrared recording of him going into this cabin in the woods, you essentially get the genre and the movie miniaturized, because there is a small lead up to the scene, which is a recording found on Gary's YouTube channel where he discusses finding this cabin in the woods, and him like talking about his out of character fear towards it. Like, he's an experienced hiker, he's seen plenty of stuff out there in the wild, but this time, without a clear explanation, suddenly he's like scared deep into his bones about this place. And when he returns home, he uploads the video, and all of his followers are, you know, calling him a coward, which makes him return. And you're already in that implication space, you know, like there is this preternatural fear. And when he gets there, he shoots his ascent to the danger zone, the place where he will die. It's shot in this grainy black and white infrared, which, once again, like considering the technological aspect of found footage, is very interesting, because it is black and white, grainy, and like really, really dark, which, like, if you say it out loud, just sounds really cliche. But because it's not composed, it is not like an imposition on the part of the filmmakers, it is just like an emergent feat of the technology. It's somehow easier to approach as this sincere thing, you know? Am I making any sense? And it's also really effective in the way it breaks down some of the fourth wall to create this sort of metafictional fear. Because when he is shooting in pitch darkness, essentially, that's the diegetic atmospheric condition, the only thing that can narc him out in the darkness is his viewfinder, which suddenly becomes this way of seeing, but also way of getting caught in a very intense life or death situation. And I don't know, maybe it's just like the contrast between this long, sort of considerate build-up where you get to know the character, which then suddenly turns into this very urgent first-person view, which is always like the scariest part in found footage movies, because it is essentially like a live stream. Like, you're experiencing stuff in real time, and the character is most vulnerable in those moments. So this shift from the objective inspecting documentary to this subjective moment of just getting caught in your life decisions is effective. And I think it is like one of the better endings to these movies. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe TikTok was right this one time. Who would have thought? So, we're at movie 11, and this was a tough one. Not the movie itself, mind you, but the selection process. Like, the further you go along in these sorts of journeys, the more you're captured by the realization that every choice you make is another door that closes. If you're gonna watch 12 movies, on the 8th you start to realize that, you know, the end is nearing. You gotta start making good choices. You just can't be slapdash, as I have been this far. And it's worked well enough. But at 11, I wanted to highlight something interesting, you know? And I was really struggling for a good while there, because I was like, should I do like a non-horror movie to pull this sort of, oh, bet you didn't know there's found footage dramas out there, fucko. And then I was like, nah, you know, maybe that would be an interesting video, like at a later date. Then I was like, oh, I should like most definitely highlight a movie from a country nobody's ever seen. So I started watching a movie from the Philippines called Salvage, which I just couldn't vibe with. Like, the constant glitching of the camera was like in such a sharp contrast with what they were trying to do, which is like a camera crew that has a busted camera like that. Like, get out of here, man. Maybe I'll watch it some other time, but just I just couldn't. Like, it just wasn't compelling to me on like a picture level. I guess the movie, like, it is pretty liked, so take this as a cautious recommendation. I'll put a link to it in the description. There are always links in the description. You should always check them. And then I was like, oh, you know, maybe I should watch another movie that really looks like something I'd like. So I was like, I'm gonna go watch 1312 Briar Place. Couldn't find it. I tried to look for a movie called Stephanie's Image. It is literally not online. The only thing that is available is this trailer. But just like, man, just like listen to this Silent Hill ass guitar theme it has. Like, am I right? That seems like the best movie ever made. And the only way I can see it is to buy this $16 plus DVD, which I currently think would be a little bit of a liability on my finances. And eventually I just kind of landed on doing something very unfeatured films. I wanted to do like an avant-garde one. So I ended up renting Funnel Web Family Refridged. It is shot on 4 CCTV cameras and it looks great, like legitimately. I really like how this movie looks. There are moments where the camera glitches in these very evocative ways. I was really stricken by the title because like Funnel Web is like, at least in my mind, it's like Funnel Web Spider, which is this extremely aggressive breed of spiders. And Refridged like give me images of danger, you know, like in feminist critique you have the fridged woman trope, and refrigeration is like storing meat and vegetables, so it's like this inherently sort of implies consumption and violence. So it's like really into it, and the first shot is like this dramatic low angle image of a utility pole, which is like immediately evocative of like a spider web, like interconnectivity of people. There's also like the low angle reminds me of like a stake through the heart. It is like a movie that I thought would be really playing up the implicative nature of found footage, like found footage but extremely abstract. And there's this like gorgeous harsh noise soundtrack that just goes right throughout the whole movie. It's apparently like a lengthened version of a 13-minute short movie. I think I would really enjoy the short movie like a bunch more than this extended version. Like, this material just does not have the pull to be a 53-minute movie. I'm sorry. Like, I'm a person who can watch all sorts of like weird avant-garde shit, but there was so much untapped potential in the imagery and the sound, and it just doesn't do anything with it. It is a nothing of a movie. But it really did remind me of a movie I consider to be pretty much perfect, which is Night Horse. It is about CCTV footage. And instead of being shot on CCTV cameras like Funnel Web Family Refridged, it is a movie compiled from like unsecured footage the director could get their hands on. And in that, it is a lot more evocative about the sort of systematic questioning CCTV would imply. Like, first of all, you have the question of why is this place under surveillance. You have like people's houses interiors, you have a beach, you have like horse stalls, like everything is being watched all the time. And because the images are mostly empty of people, you get that sort of void feeling of eyes just gazing upon the world in this like slightly malicious way. Like even when there's nothing to see, they are watching. And there are two images that bookend the movie of these weird like bulbous spheres of metal that I think are kind of like mechanical eyes that are perceiving the world. They don't have a focus, but they're always open, always recording gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of footage every day that doesn't have a point to it. It is just a cold, unfeeling eye watching over us constantly. But there is also the flip side, which is that most of these cameras are somehow unideal. You have the intersection camera, which is all sorts of broken up like digitally. And the same goes for everything. Like the placement of these cameras aren't meant to capture details. They are just there. You have spiders building webs on top of them. You have these cameras that don't work at night, which most often is associated with wrongdoings and accidents and all that stuff. So like there is this sinister aspect to the watching, but also it's a system that's just left to rot, just existing. It's an empty power that's broken and unhuman, cold, unfeeling. Like I think it wasn't meant to be like a horror movie or anything, but I think Night Horrors is one that leaves me with this itching feeling of unsafety. Like I've lost a part of myself, at least my privacy. And because of that, I feel that Night Horrors is the rightful 11th movie of this journey. Okay, bye. Alright, so the last movie has been seen around a week ago, to be honest. She had a little surgery to sterilize her, and the walks haven't been long enough to make a proper vid. I had to take a while. So sorry for the continuity, but yeah. The last movie I watched for the season was Koji Shiraishi's A Record of a Sweet Murder. How else could it be? You know, he is just the king of found footage. Like, what can I say? He's made some of the highest tier examples of the genre. He's really pushed it forward. Noroi and Occult especially are just like the best examples. Like there are scant few movies that can even rival them, and none that can pass. But yeah, Record of a Sweet Murder. I hadn't seen it up to this point, so I was kind of saving it up for a rainy day or something. And then suddenly it was 3 years later. COVID time dilation. What a magic trick. And it's the only episode of hundreds of pixelated dead bodies I haven't heard yet. So I thought it would be a great way to end this season, because now I can finally listen to the last episode of one of my favorite podcasts. And I didn't want to listen to it before recording this, because I wanted to see how close our takes are if I go in uninfluenced. And yeah, so I think to start this whole thing, we need to talk about the whole ectoplasmic worms tetralogy, which is this loose thing Koji Shiraishi has been doing since Noroi. In that tetralogy, as far as I figured, are the movies Noroi, The Curse, then there's Occult, which is a movie about a documentary crew who start to follow this person after he was in a violent altercation that possibly cursed him for life. And then there's cult. So you have occult and cult. And cult is something I haven't seen either. As far as I've gathered, it's more of a comedy experience. But there's this one scene that floats around in my Twitter circles like every half a year or something that looks like legitimately Noroi levels of terrifying. So I'm curious to watch that in another 3 years' time after the Finnish fucking fur farms release the new apocalyptic pandemic on the world. Jesus fucking Christ. I'm so proud to be a Finnish person right now. Anyways, and then there's Record of a Sweet Murder, and I think it's really also, before that, there's also the Senritsu files, which are really hard to find found footage, kind of like, I think they're like a serial thing. I think they're like shorter movies, question mark. I haven't seen one of them yet, but I do have access. Just need to commit at some point. I do need to take a little bit of a break from found footage after this, but yeah, I think it's really interesting to sort of see Koji Shiraishi do like the definitive work of found footage in Noroi the Curse, and then going to iterate on the style on occult, cult, and now A Record of a Sweet Murder, which is another more serious take on found footage. By the way, these movies are like creme de la creme, so if you're bothered about spoilers, once again, I said it in the second part, but like, if you're squeamish about spoilers, you really should like put a stop here and go see A Record of a Sweet Murder, because I will spoil the whole thing, and it is like a significant work of the genre, unlike a lot of the things we've been discussing. But yeah, okay, so A Record of a Sweet Murder, it's about this reporter, a South Korean reporter, who gets a message from one of her childhood friends who's escaped from the mental facility and has killed 18 people. Turns out it's 25, and he's trying to kill 27. We'll get back to it. So she goes to see him, and it's specified that they need a Japanese like videographer to be present, and the murderer has set a rule that everything needs to be in one shot. And I think that's a really interesting, fun diversion for the formula, because most of the time you do get these like cuts when the character doesn't deem something to be interesting enough, which is, you know, very understandable from a production standpoint. But this time they just fully commit to the bit of it being one shot, because not only is it interesting for the viewer, and it really creates this sense of verisimilitude, and it breaks down the fourth wall and all that stuff I've been talking about throughout the whole series, but also diegetically it is about like the trueness of the footage itself. The thing the murderer is trying to accomplish is to create and demonstrate a miracle, because he hears the voice of God in his head that is telling him to kill 27 people on his 27th birthday to resurrect one of their other childhood friends who died in a car accident. And when that happens, all of the victims he has sacrificed will return also. So it is this, miracle of miracles. And to demonstrate that it happened to begin with, he needs to have the footage, and the footage needs to be as hard to fake as it can be, so one shot, right? And it is like playing with the fourth wall also, because, you know, if you catch on to that vibe, you're immediately thinking that hell yeah, dude, like the fact that it's one shot, diegetically being hard to fake, we are also as an audience primed to think about how hard it is to fake one shot like this. So it is calling attention to its technicality. So compared to Noroi and Occult, and probably Cult 2. Once again, haven't seen it. It is bringing another dimension to the formula. It is this virtuosic display of found footage, which is interesting. Also, one of the things it brings to the table is that it is also almost like a play, because it is, to begin with, 3 people in a room, and then the cast expands as they come into the space they are filming in. And it is mostly about power relations, trying to convince people, and like you could really easily make this a play, although then you'd lose the whole point of it being a found footage movie, which is very central. But you know, you could script this as a play and it would still work. And I thought that was really interesting, and I think the interactions have a sort of certain quality to them where we're not really engaging with the supernatural aspect as directly as with, you know, Occult and Narui. Instead, we are dealing with the knowing question of how real is this? This person already has certain aspects that make him an unreliable narrator, and all of the proof he makes is circumstantial but also miraculous at the same time. Like there's a scene where he makes a prediction based on the main journalist lady's article about like labor rights, where it says that someone will come at a certain point and they have to be dealt with in these and these and these ways, and then there's immediately a glitchy phone call that tells more instructions at the predicted time and all that. Like it is very interested in this sort of membrane between reality and unreality, and playing with the tension that lies in between those. And in some key ways, that is like the central conceit of found footage, right? Because it is playing with the is this real, is it not? Although, as I said, I am personally not like super interested in the is this actually real? I'm always like engaging it, like is it real within the fiction? Like what is it trying to, like I'm buying into it. My suspension of disbelief is multi-layered, and it's a prism of having a ton of fun. Anyway, let's not get into it. I'm just pointing it out. Like it is doing that in this very interesting virtuosic way. Considering the feats Koji Shiraishi has achieved, I think even at the best of times, A Record of a Sweet Murder is a lesser work. It is not so like hermetically terrifying as Narui, because it creates this whole system of symbols and like in fiction predictions about what's going to happen that are so subtle that you need to watch it multiple times to catch on to every one of them. And because of that, it creates this feeling that from the moment go you've already lost and you're just chasing your own ghost, which is a super terrifying realization to have like third time in or something, you know? Whereas Occult is more about how doing this documentary is participating in this act of violence. You as a member of the audience and the people creating the movie are getting drawn into an outcome they wouldn't have participated in otherwise, but the pretext of the documentary is guiding them towards it. And as I said, compared to the two of those, the fear in Record of a Sweet Murder is a lot more intimate, but also a lot more vague. It's about ambiguity. It's about not being sure about the outcome, about the proof, about anything. It is about this uncertainty of how these acts will play out. And that's where the struggle for power comes in, because it is like fundamentally about how things get done in a conflict situation, which is by interpreting vagueness and violence. Like, most of all, it is about how ideas are enforced by violence and how that misshapes the reality around the situation. Sadly then, for me, is that one of the major ways that violence manifests in A Record of a Sweet Murder is a very central, long, torturous rape scene. And now, rape scenes are an incredibly complicated thing in media. Like, I think ever since media analysis became a major part of like feminist discourse, we've been having this discussion in several different ways and several different contexts, and I don't think I have the time nor the chops to do a whole thing about it here. But you know, the discussion goes back and forth on how to do it responsibly and how to employ it in a way that's not exploitative or hurtful or just generally kind of fucked up. And like, if we consider the history of genre cinema's portrayal of rape, A Record of a Sweet Murder isn't like the worst scenario in any way. It is not titillating to start with. It is most of all just kind of pathetic and impotent, and you know, it is kind of like grounded in the story and all that sort of stuff. Like it is covering a lot of bases, but at the same time it does have that slightly zany feeling to it, and I think it plays into some really old, bordering on rape apologia sort of stereotypes about female sexuality. That is to say that the character that gets raped actually enjoys it, and it is one of her like main sexual fantasies, which then plays into another level of the power play and, you know, all that. But like, you know, I'm not here to say that you cannot have a powerful rape scene. I think, you know, oh man, just talking about this makes me feel so like a garbage person, kinda. Like, it is such a sensitive topic. There's an article my partner showed me around the time we got together that was about people who do theater in Finland, like female actors, and how most of them have, you know, done a rape scene at some point in their career. Most of them multiple times. And considering the intersection of 1/5 of all women experience sexual assault in some way, combined with that statistic, it is like a horrible thing that can easily re-traumatize or just like perpetuate, like just damage on multiple levels, like personal, interpersonal, societal. Like, you know, it is such a complicated topic, and I don't feel like I love Koji Shiraishi, but I don't think, at least based on this, he has the chops to do it well. And it is one of the major like bummers about A Record of a Sweet Murder. And I don't know, like, it really took the wind out of my sails when I got to that part. You know, even doing this part makes me feel like really bad. Like, I don't know, man. Just makes me think. Like, it is an okay movie. Like, it is actually like a good movie, like, compared to a lot of the more mainstream examples. Like, it is still Koji Shiraishi. He has the touch, but I just wish he wouldn't have, you know, I don't want to close on it. Like, I don't want to, I don't want to have the grand finale of my long ass personal sort of video about one of my favorite subgenres of cinema to be like, hey man, did you know what this motherfucker just did? Huh. It is an interesting movie, like thematically, and like to see it play out in this sort of, as I said, like virtuosic way. Like, it is really extending the like borders of what found footage is to him, and he's using all of these like interesting fourth wall breaking things and all that, but I don't know, man. The ending is sweet though. Like, there's actually for a change, there's a pretty sweet, see what I did there? Ending. Yeah, I'm just gonna probably just leave it there. I think the ending is really sweet. Like, the whole build up with them getting out of the apartment and the main journalist lady letting herself be killed for the greater good, you know, especially since she's dying already. And then the murderer getting the camera and having a small crisis of faith, getting it reaffirmed, saving the children, acknowledging what he has to do, going through it, and then in a parallel universe where everything went well, which is, you know, mirroring the ending of Occult, they decide to push it aside and live their lives free of the influence. And I think that's kind of the sort of beautiful ending to the tetralogy. Oh no, could be that Cult is the last movie and this just doesn't work, but well, let's just run with it. It is the beautiful ending to the sort of lineage from Noroi to Occult to Record of a Sweet Murder, where eventually they just let go and live a life unaffected by forces beyond their control. It is like such an life-affirming, philosophically potent ending that I just can't bash the movie. Like, it is a land of contrasts. Yeah.
Alright, so what have we learned? Well, I hope the thing that will stick with you is to support SFUltra, patreon.com/SFUltra, but also that found footage movies are good actually. The one thing I found myself thinking about over and over again during this season were the different strains of found footage that I don't think have been codified in any length. And me personally, well, I can't refuse a bit of taxonomy, so let's do this. First off, I think the most obvious category is just discovered raw footage. You have your Blair Witches, Cloverfields, The Outwaters, you know, basically what it says on the genre tin. Just some scary stuff on video somebody found somewhere. I would also count the sort of vloggy stuff like Marble Hornets, Leaving DC, and from what I've seen, Gonjiam in this category, even though it has a distinct vibe to it. Call it a sub-genre. I think metatextually this category of like raw footage has a lot going on because to be watching this footage implies some sort of illicitness, maybe of the voyeuristic kind, or maybe you're some sort of an insider that has the clearance to be watching this footage. From the ones I listed, I think Cloverfield has the strongest use of this form because the opening and closing text implies that the audience is some sort of a government official reviewing on-the-ground footage of an unprecedented catastrophe that struck New York. I don't really remember it being used effectively somewhere else, but this inherent tension to the style is fascinating. Why are you watching, or better yet, should you be watching, is a compelling question to impose on the audience, especially since it annihilates the fourth wall in a subtle way. The second category is pretty obvious too, the mockumentary. From the top of my head, this is the most popular category, which most of the movies in this video fall into. But it's a bit too broad for my taste, so I'm proposing two variables: state of completion and platform it was made for in fiction. I already discussed this quite a lot in the video, but I wanted to formalize it a bit more to make it as clear as possible. So let's start with the platform. The most intuitive platform is the movie itself. Let's take Forbidden Quest for an example. It's not trying to emulate a style, there's no meta text going, it's just a movie. Then think of something like Psychic Vision Jaganrei or Noroi or Fourth Kind. All of them are referencing a TV format and thus probably will be enriched as an experience if you catch that reference. I think this category is popular because it has an inbuilt explanation as to why it's happening, which should help with the suspension of disbelief, which honestly, I think people are a bit too hung up on. Anyways, the second axis is the state of completion, or more accurately, how much do we get unintentional behind the scenes material. I don't think this is a binary system, it's more of a sliding scale. If you're looking for the purest example of a fully completed movie, I think Horror in the High Desert is a great example, whereas Psychic Vision Jaganrei is my ideal of an incomplete one, because we're constantly seeing the production unravel at the seams. Even though Jaganrei isn't a highlight for me among the movies I've talked about here, I think that aspect is really strong. The confines of a documentary are sort of like a safeguard, which are progressively broken down by the encroachment of the behind-the-scenes material. It's chaos itself worming its way into the structure of the movie. I think that's really neat, and presents super interesting avenues for further exploration. And then there are the two newer ones I didn't talk about at all. Screen life, as the term suggests, are movies that take place on fictional screens, be they phone or computer. I'm pretty sure the first horror one was Collingwood Story from 2005, but the real popularizer was 2014's Unfriended. I was planning on watching Deadware for this video, but decided on the last minute to go with Funnel Web Family Refridgerated, so I haven't seen any one of these, and can't really comment. Sorry. The other one is more contentious. Analog horror isn't exactly found footage, it's more of an offshoot or a subgenre. I do think the connection between this is interesting, and I don't think I've heard anyone say it out loud, even though it's pretty obvious. What I think about analog horror is a little bit more complicated though. I've tried to dabble for years, and there are some great singular episodes here and there, but I feel that they always end up relying on tropes that I just hate. I just don't see the appeal of doing children's TV but fucked up. The Jurassic Park analog horror is the worst example of these tendencies. Like, it's supposed to be a conceptual slam dunk because you have this park where they're gonna be doing like security training, and that's kind of like the whole vibe of analog horror. And the dinosaurs are scary on their own, like there's a whole like sort of movement about trying to make dinosaurs scary again, even with like feathers and stuff, and I'm a huge fan. But for whatever weird fucking reason, they do this? Like, just look at this. What the fuck is this? Okay. As a fellow VHS/standard definition enjoyer, I do like the idea of analog horror, but there's always something about the execution that leaves me wanting. But, you know, who am I to say? At the end of the day, analog horror is one of those movements that's gonna make a huge splash in the mainstream, and we can already kind of see the influence and stuff like Skinamarink, which also I didn't really like at all, contrary in the day. I'm hopelessly out of touch with the mainstream discourse, so I'm no longer sure what's the general consensus on found footage movies, but the last time I checked they were still pretty unpopular. And you know, fair dues, but I personally think it's a fantastic subgenre chock full of gems. And as promised, I want to cap the video off by talking about 3 favorites that I think you should go seek out in addition to the ones I focused on here. Savage Land is a 2015 fake documentary about a massacre that befell the fictional town of Sangre de Cristo. Overnight, the whole town was slaughtered, except for a sole survivor who has been taken into custody as the perpetrator. The public has already made up its mind about the verdict, but things get a little bit more complicated as a reel of photographs taken by him gets unearthed during the litigation. Savage Land might be the most overtly political found footage movie I've seen, and the way it handles the found footage element by shifting it from video to photographs is incredibly effective. Some of these pictures have haunted me for years at this point. Savage Land is a stellar achievement in the genre. The movie is up on YouTube, so you should be running, not walking to see it. In the initial months of COVID, during the only couple of weeks I didn't work, I was laying on my sofa, bored to tears. I don't remember how I got there, but by some miracle of the YouTube algorithm, I saw Rorschach. It's a shoestring movie about supernatural investigation that was directed by C.A. Smith, who hasn't directed anything since Rorschach dropped in 2015. I hope he comes back though, because even though the story is about what you'd expect, the execution is incredible. It left me in a similar I should stop watching this feeling as leaving DC or Actually Happened, which was the exact type of distraction from the pandemic I needed. Much like those two, it's a subtle slow burn, but the scares are even more low-key. They feel eerily similar to experiences people talk about in hushed tones, prefaced with, "I don't believe in ghosts, but..." Incredible movie, and like so many of these, it's on YouTube. Pour one out for the real one though. If Smith doesn't return to directing, he came and left on a high note. I'm not going to say a single thing about One Cut for the Dead, because it's the most spoilable movies out there, but if you trust me, and you have a social gathering this Halloween, seek it out and play it without anyone knowing a single thing about it. That's how I saw it on the recommendation of my friend Aleksis, and by the end, the whole room was hollering and screaming. It's the most joyous celebration of found footage cinema there is, and if you've seen those Hollywood is Great actually Oscar bait movies from the last couple of years, you owe it to yourself to watch this. And with that, we're completely done. Happy Halloween!